Welcome, dear listener. Settle into stillness and let your body rest as the evening unfolds around you. This is a story of soft wonder, of moonlight, of gentle companionship, and of a love so quiet it hums like a lullaby. Close your eyes and imagine the hush of night, a night that carries with it a tender mystery, a night when shadows slip free and longing takes a new shape. Allow your breathing to slow and drift with me into this gentle tale. Nila lived in a small home at the edge of a quiet village, a place where the air always seemed touched with silver. The lanes were narrow, lined with smooth stones, and each evening the lanterns swayed in the breeze, painting ripples of light across the walls. For as long as she could remember, her shadow had been her companion. It followed her across the courtyards, stretched across the grass in the meadow, curled along her bedside when the candlelight flickered low. It had always been there, steady, familiar, and silent. But one evening, as the first stars began to glimmer above, she noticed something strange. The lamplight burned softly at her doorway, yet the ground was empty, no dark outline at her feet, no soft shape rising against the wall. Her shadow was gone. At first, she thought it a trick of her eyes. She tilted her head, moved her hands, even lit another candle, but there was nothing. The warm glow touched her, yet no darker twin answered in kind. She sat quietly on the step outside her home, the night curling around her like a shawl. A curious ache stirred in her chest. Shadows were not supposed to wander, and yet hers had slipped away as if drawn by some secret longing. 4 nights afterward, Neela found herself looking. On the walls of her room, on the cobblestones of the lane, she searched for that silent, dark reflection. She whispered softly to the air, as if her shadow might be listening, "Where have you gone?" And though there was no reply, she thought she could almost feel a hush, a gentle pause in the breeze, like the world holding its breath. She began to wonder. Perhaps her shadow had grown restless. Perhaps it had wandered into the night, searching for the places she herself never dared to go. And in that wondering, a quiet longing began to take root, not only for her shadow's return, but for the stillness it seemed to seek. She lay awake at night, listening to the rhythm of crickets, the sigh of leaves, and the distant lull of the river. In the absence of her shadow, she felt both emptiness and invitation, a call to follow. Neela pressed her palms together and made a soft vow under the moonlight. Tomorrow she would step beyond her doorstep and walk the paths her shadow once loved. She would follow where it wandered, and perhaps somewhere in the quiet of the night she would find what it was seeking. The thought soothed her as she drifted into sleep, the silence of her room gently wrapping around her like a tender breath. The next evening arrived softly, as if the day itself had tiptoed away to give night more room. The sky deepened into shades of indigo, and the first stars appeared like small lanterns being lit, one by one. Neela wrapped herself in a light shawl and stepped beyond her threshold. The village was hushed, lanterns swaying faintly along the lanes, their glow spilling in golden pools onto the cobblestones. She looked down again, and as she expected, the ground was bare. No shadow fell at her feet. A quiet determination guided her. She turned toward the paths where she remembered her shadow often stretched and played the places she had once walked absent-mindedly, never noticing how her darker twin seemed to linger, to wander farther than she dared. Her steps carried her first to the meadow just beyond the village. The grass was tall and silvered by moonlight, swaying gently in the cool breeze. She paused at its edge, listening. The night hummed with small life, crickets in their endless rhythm, the rustle of wings as an owl glided silently overhead. the soft exhale of earth settling deeper into itself. Nila let her hand brush the tops of the grasses, each stem cool against her fingertips. She thought of how her shadow once stretched long here, bending and bowing with the breeze. And though she could not see it now, she felt its absence like a hush just behind her shoulder, urging her onward. She walked further until the meadow opened into the quiet courtyard of an abandoned chapel. The old bell tower loomed above, its stone dark and worn smooth by time. The moonlight slipped across the stones in pale ribbons, and for a moment she thought she saw the suggestion of her shadow along the wall. A flicker, a whisper of dark. But when she blinked, it was gone. She stood there, hands folded loosely before her, listening to the silence. It was not empty silence, but a living, breathing stillness, the kind that felt like someone just beyond. Sight was listening too. Her footsteps echoed softly as she circled the courtyard. Each echo felt like a memory, like the soft call of her shadow saying, "Here." I have been here. She thought back to childhood evenings when she used to chase her shadow, twirling and dancing under lantern light. It had always kept close then, a playmate made of night. How strange, she mused, that only now she realized it may have had longings of its own. And so she followed further still, past the chapel, along the narrow path that wound toward the riverbank. The water was calm, its surface dark as ink, with soft threads of moonlight caught upon it. The reflection of the trees leaned long across the water's skin, swaying gently with the current. Nila lowered herself onto the grass and simply sat. For a while, her shawl draped across her lap. She let the night seep into her, the sounds, the scents, the coolness of the earth beneath her. She breathed deeply, slowly, as though the very rhythm of the evening was weaving itself into her bones. And though her eyes saw no shadow, her heart felt its trail leading her deeper into this quiet, as if it were pointing her towards something or someone. Waiting in the places between silence and breath. Later that night, when the stars had scattered fully across the sky, she rose once more. Her steps turned back toward the old chapel, the bell tower rising like a dark guardian against the starlight. Something tugged at her, not fear, but a gentle pull, like a hand beckoning softly from within. And for the first time, she wondered if her shadow had not simply left her, but gone ahead, seeking someone who lingered in the stillness. The bell tower rose above Nila like a sentinel of stone and silence. Its windows were hollow, the bell long since stilled, yet the place seemed alive with quiet memory. She stepped softly into the courtyard once more, her sandals brushing against the worn cobblestones. Inside, the air was cooler, touched with the scent of stone dust and faint moss. Moonlight poured in through the broken arches, settling in pale pools upon the floor. Nila paused just inside, her breath slow, her eyes adjusting to the softened dark. And then she felt it, not a sound, not a movement, but a presence. Someone was here. From the far side of the bell tower, near where the moonlight curved against the wall, a figure stepped forward. His movements were unhurried, his form half draped in silver light. He carried himself with a stillness that felt both gentle and certain, like a man long accustomed to listening to the silence of nights such as these. His gaze lifted to hers, and Nila felt a curious warmth rush through her, though the air around them was cool. He did not speak at once, nor did she. There was no need. The quiet between them carried more weight than words could hold. At last, in a voice low and hushed, the man said, "Your shadow has been here." Nila's breath caught softly in her chest. "Mine?" He nodded. "It wandered here. Long before. You." His voice was like dusk itself, slow and steady, each word placed with care. I thought it strange to see a shadow unaccompanied, but it lingered as if searching, and now his eyes rested on her, calm and steady. Now you are here. A shiver of wonder passed through her, not of fear, but of recognition, as though some invisible thread had drawn her to this place. She glanced at the stones, at the patches of moonlight, half expecting to see her shadow return to her feet. At last, yet still, there was only emptiness. Why would it come here? She whispered. The man tilted his head, considering. Perhaps it wished to meet mine. And at his words, he lifted his hand toward the wall where the moonlight fell. Nila looked, and though his shadow stretched softly there, she noticed it flicker, bending slightly, as though another unseen outline brushed against it. Her heart softened in her chest, warmed by the strange, tender thought. Could it be that shadows too longed for companionship? That they wandered toward one another when the world grew quiet? The man stepped closer, though not too close, just near enough that she could see the way his hair caught the silver glow. The way his eyes seemed to hold the stillness of the night sky. I think, he said softly, your shadow found its way here first, so that you would follow. His words lingered in the air like a candle's glow, warm and steady. Nila lowered her gaze, her shawl slipping slightly from her shoulder. Without a word, the man lifted his hand, not touching, only adjusting the fabric lightly, letting it rest more securely against her. The gesture was simple, quiet, but filled with a gentleness that settled deep within her. For the first time since her shadow had vanished, Nila felt less alone. The emptiness that had followed her steps now seemed softened, as if filled with the presence of this man who understood. They did not speak further. Instead, they sat side by side on the worn stones of the bell tower, their shoulders not quite touching, their gazes resting on the patchwork of stars beyond the arches. And though her shadow did not yet return, Nila felt the sense of belonging. A beginning in the hush that stretched gently between them. The night unfolded slowly around them, like a curtain drawn back to reveal the stars. Nila and the quiet man remained seated upon the stones, the bell tower breathing its hush around them. The silence was not empty, it was soft, living, threaded with something warm that needed no words. After some time, the man turned his head toward her, his voice a murmur low enough that it barely disturbed the air. Do you feel it? Nila looked at him, her eyes questioning. He gestured faintly to the wall before them, to the moonlit patch where his shadow lay. They've met before, yours and mine, long before tonight. She followed his gaze, and though her eyes could not see her own shadow, something within her stirred a recognition, like remembering a half-forgotten melody. The moonlight shifted slightly as a breeze passed through the broken arches, and for an instant she thought she saw two outlines instead of one, mingling briefly before dissolving again into stillness. A quiet shiver moved through her, not of cold, but of wonder. My shadow, she whispered. It must have known your path before I did. He nodded, his expression calm, touched with the softness of someone who understood more than he said aloud. Perhaps they found each other because we had not yet found our way. Here, the thought settled between them, delicate and steady. Nila lowered her eyes, a small smile tugging gently at her lips. There was a tender strangeness in the idea that what lingered closest to her soul had already reached toward his, long before she herself had dared. She folded her hands in her lap, the shawl's edge brushing her wrist. The man's gaze lingered upon her with a quiet warmth, not insistent, not searching, simply present, as if he was content to sit in the stillness until morning. And Nila found she was too. Above them, the stars leaned closer. Their light drifted through the arches, painting faint glimmers on the floor between them. It felt somehow as if the sky itself was weaving them into a single thread, a slow, steady braid of silence and presence, of shadows that had touched. Before their owners did, the man rested his palms against the stone, tilting his face upward to the stars. His profile was softened by the moonlight, each line calm, unhurried, familiar in a way she could not explain. And in that moment, Neela realized that the longing she had felt these many nights, the soft take for her missing shadow, had been guiding her to this stillness, to this meeting, not to recover what she had lost, but to discover what was quietly waiting. A hush fell even deeper around them, like a blanket being drawn close. She let her eyes rest on his for a breath, and though neither spoke, something passed between them, a recognition, gentle and certain, like two notes finally belonging to the same song, and in the faint shimmer of moonlight, their shadows, though faint, seemed to bend together across the wall, intertwining in a soft, silent embrace. The night had grown deep and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. Neela rose slowly from the stones of the bell tower, the soft fabric of her shawl brushing against her arm. The man stood as well, his movements calm, unhurried, as though there were no need to rush in a place that belonged entirely to stillness. They stepped outside together, into the courtyard where the grass bent gently under the breeze. The moon hung low and bright, its light tender upon the ground. For the first time since her shadow had left, Neela glanced down, and there it was, a soft outline stretched beside her, dark against the silver stones. She let out a small, steady breath, her heart easing in her chest. Her shadow had returned, and beside it, his shadow leaned close, stretching long across the courtyard stones. She watched as the two shadows touched at the edges, brushed and lingered together. Their outlines swayed in the breeze, weaving gently into one another like threads. "They've found each other," the man said quietly, his voice low and warm. Neela nodded, her gaze soft, her lips curving into a faint smile. "And so have we." The words were little more than a breath, but they carried between them with the weight of truth. They began to walk, their steps unhurried, moving side by side through the meadow path. The night wrapped around them, the hush of grasses, the distant hum of crickets, the occasional sigh of the river. Every sound seemed softened, as if bowing itself to their presence. At tea times, their hands brushed lightly as they walked, neither pulled away. The touch was not planned, not forced, simply the natural closeness of two who had found comfort in one another's silence. Her shawl slipped again, and this time he adjusted it without a word, his fingers brushing softly against her shoulder. The touch lingered only for a moment, but it felt like a promise, not of grand declarations, but of steady companionship. They walked to the river's edge, where the water shimmered in threads of silver, sitting side by side on the grass. They let the night carry them. The stars leaned brighter above, mirrored in the river's still surface, so that it felt as though they sat between two skies. Neela let her head rest lightly against his shoulder. He did not move, did not shift, only let her find comfort there. His breathing was steady, deep, like the rhythm of the earth itself. She matched her breath to his, letting the calm settle deeper into her body, and in the grass beside them, there, shadows lay folded together, no longer wandering, no longer separate, but at rest. In that stillness, Neela understood. Her shadow had not left her to abandon her, but to lead her toward this, the quiet, the presence, the closeness she had longed for without knowing it. Her heart felt steady, wrapped in a peace that had no need for more than this moment. The two of them remained by the river, their shoulders touching gently, their shadows curled close at their feet. No words were needed. The night itself was their conversation. The night settled deeper, as if it had drawn a blanket over the earth. The river whispered softly beside them, carrying the stars in its surface, each ripple a lullaby. Nila leaned a little more fully into the man's shoulder. He did not move, did not disturb the quiet, but simply breathed with her slow and steady, like the rhythm of the tide. She felt the calm of his presence wrap gently around her, as if she had always known its shape. Their shadows stretched on the grass, dark, yet tender, resting together like sleeping wings. The sight made her heart soften further, a reminder that even the quietest parts of her had been reaching for this moment all along. Above them, the stars drifted brighter. Some shimmered faintly, some pulsed gently, but all of them seemed to lean lower, as though keeping watch. The moon curved higher, bathing them in a pale, silken glow, and no words were needed. The silence itself was full, humming softly with the closeness between them. Neela let her hand rest lightly on the grass, and after a moment she felt his hand brush against hers. Not a grasp, not a claim, simply the quiet meeting of warmth. Two palms close enough that the night air no longer filled the space between. She thought of her shadow, how it had slipped away, how it had wandered into stillness. Perhaps it had always known that she would find peace here, beneath this sky, beside this quiet man whose presence felt like rest itself. The world around them hushed further. The meadows stilled, the crickets softened, the river's song grew low and slow. It was as though the night itself was falling asleep with them. Neela's eyes fluttered closed. She let the last traces of wakefulness drift like leaves into the current. She felt her breath join his, steady and even, their rhythms folding into one another until they were inseparable. Her last thought before slipping fully into dreams was simple, gentle. I am not alone anymore, and in that thought, peace settled completely. The shadows at their feet curved together, folding like wings around the two of them. The stars shimmered one last time, as if sighing, and then the night became utterly still. And so, the night carried them into rest. Her shadow no longer wandered, for it had found its place beside another, and Neela too had found hers. Not in noise or in searching, but in silence, in stillness, in closeness. May your own heart find such peace tonight. May your breath grow slow, your thoughts soften, and your dreams unfold like gentle wings. Rest now. The story has ended, but the calm remains. Sleep deeply and drift into the quiet.